Okay, I'd like to call our Finance Committee meeting to order, please. Doug, are there any speakers?
No public speakers.
Okay. The first order of our business today is the approval of minutes of our March 26, 2012 meeting. A motion, please. Okay, all in favor? All opposed? The minutes are approved. Doug, you want to talk about the committee work plan, please?
There are no changes to the work plan, Andrew.
Okay, and then please go right into the budget.
Sure. April Budget Watch, we're going to be focusing on preliminary results for March and April. Before I get into the details, I'm pleased to report that we're doing well on a monthly and year-to-date basis when compared with the budget. Passenger revenues for the month were better than budget by $4 million or 1%, which increases the year-to-date favorable variance to $11 million, also 1%. The majority of that increase is from the commuter railroads, particularly the Long Island Railroad, which is doing well above budget and is aided by favorable weather and higher New York City employment than what was projected when we put the budget together. Year-to-date passenger revenue is up 5% at the Long Island Railroad and over 3% for Metro North. New York City Transit passenger revenue was on target for the month and year-to-date. March toll revenue was slightly unfavorable. However, their year-to-date results are still $7 million or 2% favorable. Moving to expenses, operating expenses were favorable for the month and year-to-date. $30 million for the month and $65 million on a year-to-date basis. We think a lot of that variance, though, is timing, and that's what we'll be looking at between now and the final estimate, the final mid-year forecast that we put together in July as part of the July financial plan. In spite of the fact that expenses are low, we actually are doing unfavorably on the overtime, which is something that we're very concerned about and looking at very closely. For the month, we are $2 million unfavorable, and that increased the unfavorable variance to $10 million, which is roughly almost 10% unfavorable, and that's in spite of some favorable weather. And a lot of the reason for that variance is vacancies and additional maintenance, which I believe some of the operating committees spoke about today. And like I said, we're looking at that very closely. Moving to subsidies. Payroll mobility taxes of $100 million or $29 million lower than the budget, but that was strictly due to timing. We were expecting $50 million in the month of April from the state for those replacement funds that were promised, and literally it was just a misunderstanding of what they call April and what we call April. We're going to get it in the very first week of May. There's a 2-week period that they have to validate the numbers. So the reality is we were really $21 million favorable for the month, which was very good news because that reduces the year-to-date variance to only $13 million unfavorable. So we were $21 million favorable for the month, lowering that year-to-date to 13, considering we did poorly with all the bonuses. So there may be some optimism in that tax, and that's something we're looking at very closely. PBT taxes were $10 million unfavorable for the month. Year-to-date, they're $14 million unfavorable. This is a tax that's very difficult to forecast. There's always pretty wild swings in the timing on those variances. So we're not concerned about that. We think that's probably just timing variances that will correct as the year gets later. Real estate taxes, we had a pretty good month. We were $1 million above the budget, which reduced the unfavorable year-to-date variance to $10 million. The only thing that's really unfavorable year-to-date are the MRT receipts, which are $8 million unfavorable year-to-date. To summarize, preliminary results for the month were favorable as the higher passenger revenue and lower expenses resulted in a favorable monthly variance. Subsidy results were actually favorable for the month, excluding that $50 million timing variance that I described. And year-to-date, operating results are favorable, and they're slightly offset by some unfavorable subsidy results, but nothing too drastic. Overall, I would say at budget or slightly favorable overall for our finances.
I don't know how I don't know how everybody else feels, but I think that the $65 million expense savings still seems to be holding, which is a very important thing for us going forward. Gives us a good cushion here on other things that could happen. And the only thing I might say is that the one bad thing is, as you commented, Doug, is the overtime. And I hope that the committees are really looking at that and seeing what we can do about it.
Yeah. I think that everything I've heard, that's a high focus for MTA management right now.
Anything on Budget Watch from anybody? Al?
Yes, it was I guess about 3 months ago when Mitch Paley and I raised the issue of adding it back into the budget, $20 million for service restorations, and at that time there was a lot of discussion, and I think it was taken seriously by a lot of members of the board, some who expressed concerns about the budget situation, about the uncertainties in the budget, including the state of New York, whether or not they would live up to their commitments in terms of putting monies back in that were being taken away. And I think that from most of what we've seen, the news has been fairly good, including Governor Cuomo living up to his commitment to make us whole. We haven't gotten the check yet, but I expect that the first week of May on an Albany basis for April will be good on that account. So I would ask that this board look at the issue of coming up with a plan to restore some of the services and or provide some funding for some service enhancements in parts of the region that services may not have existed before. I know we did Port Washington branch last week, which was an item we had spoken about at that time, which I think is a terrific thing. And there are other areas of the region that need to be addressed as well. And I would hope that this committee and the chair could come up with something so that when we go to the residents of and our riders looking for fare and toll enhancements in the fall, that we can show that we're not just cutting things, that we're being prudent, and in those areas where services need to be dealt with, that we have a positive plan as well.
Finance Watch, Pat.
Thank you. Good morning. Finance Watch appears on Roman numeral 4-1 of the committee book this morning, as well as a handout that was put on your desk just this morning. The first part I'll cover the book, which is that we executed on April 5th a competitively bid hedge for ultra-low sulfur diesel, and that was $11 million notional amount. This was won by Bank of America Merrill Lynch for an all-in price of $3.16 per gallon, and that locked in 193,000 gallons each month. So if you go to the bottom of that, we just note that, on a weighted average basis, all of our existing hedges lock in a price of $2.99 a gallon for about 30 million gallons in 2012. And I know there's going to be some additional discussion of the fuel hedge program later. So, turning to the handout, we want to report the results of a transaction that includes new money as well as a refunding component. This is the Transportation Revenue Bonds 2012C. We priced on April 16th and 17th. April 16th for retail, where we saw $300 million of orders from retail investors for the bonds. This was a very strong result from the retail investor community. That allowed us to tighten pricing the next morning before we took institutional orders. We saw very strong institutional investor demand for the bonds, over $1.7 billion in orders. That allowed us to come back at the end of the day and tighten pricing further. And this was all handled very well by one of our rotating senior managers, Wells Fargo Group, that worked together with M.R. Beal as rotating WMBE manager, special co-senior manager on the deal. Because market conditions were very favorable, Wells Fargo had been modeling refundings for us, and we determined at that time to add a $200 million refunding component, advanced refunding component, and you see here all the results on the back of the page are in. And you see the combined basis as well as the new money and the refunding components discretely presented. The refunding refunded about $174 million of the 2002 F bonds, and that resulted in savings of approximately $14.8 million, or 7.95%. I would just note here that this shows that the BIC is in the refunding. We're waiting for final confirmation from State Division of the Budget that the BIC would be waived on these bonds, and we expect that to be resolved very soon. So unless there's any questions, that concludes Finance Watch. Okay.
Next item is the MTA headquarters annual investment report. Who's going to do that?
Yeah, Vinay is here, but what we're asking the board to approve is the staff summary is to provide the board information on the MTA portfolio investment performance for the period 1/1/2011 to 12/31/2011, and to obtain board approval of the MTA 2011 annual investment report and the MTA all-agency investment guidelines pursuant to the Public Authorities Law, Section 2925.
Okay, a motion, please. Second, please. All in favor? Opposed? So moved. Okay.
Can I just ask one question? Not to do with the passage of this, but the level of short-term. It seems like an average daily balance of $3 billion is a pretty hefty number. Is that just the way life is?
Yeah. Vinay.
If you notice the table, the funds include borrowed funds, transportation revenue bond funds, other capital restricted funds, along with our working capital. So that adds up to a lot larger balance.
I think what Vinay is saying is, to the extent that we have monies in our debt service account, that's going to be spent very quickly, and so that, of course, would be on a short-term basis, and then also our working capital is going to be short-term. So not many opportunities to go out, much longer. Pardon? Jim, you want to? Oh. Again, the amount of money that we have in our working capital, and that's what we have to just make sure we have sufficient funds to pay the bills, is about $1.2 billion, I think, right now. The balance of the funds are in trusteed accounts for debt service, or they're in construction accounts. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and again, to put it in context, we spend about $250 million a week on our an operating budget. So right now we're a little bit above a month of cash in the bank.
You can't expect, I think I've watched this for years, and we don't want to get to a point where we don't have a cushion. You have no fallback, God forbid, emergencies, things like that. It sounds like a lot of money, but don't forget, as Bob said, you're spending over a quarter of $250 million a week here. So that's not a heck of a lot, if any contingency comes up. It sounds like a really big number, but this is a big place with a huge payroll and a lot of weekly expenses. And we don't want to run tight so that we ever, God forbid, get in any kind of problem. We can't pay our bills.
I understand that. Thank you.
Okay. Nurier? Oh, Chuck?
Quick question. On the auction rate securities, are these the ones that were issued 5 and 10 years ago?
Yeah, those were actually, I'm not sure which, what you're looking at.
I'm looking at your handout.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I will be speaking about this. Yeah, the auction rate bonds that are outstanding relate to two issues, the 2 Broadway COPs, as well as an issue of transportation revenue bonds that remains outstanding. And they were issued years ago. Yeah.
Okay. Nurier, welcome. It's
Thank
the first
you.
time you came down here to see us, and I hope it's a good experience.
So do I.
Anyway, welcome, and Go ahead, we're here.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As you may know, for the past couple years, we have been instituting a number of actions to curtail the burgeoning cost of our paratransit services. And so before you today is a proposal to offer zero-fare Metro cards to paratransit-eligible customers that would allow these customers to free passage on our transit buses and subways. The program really is intended to incentivize the use of fixed route system by those paratransit eligible customers who are medically able to use fixed route service for some of their travel. So the staff summary before you is seeking board authorization to commence the public hearing process, which is going to be necessary to effectuate the required tariff change.
Noria, who in the agency would be the correct person to ascertain whether somebody was able to use our fixed routes or not?
Okay.
I mean, who's going to determine what handicap, obviously, or what disability is not so severe that they can use the transit system?
Okay. As you may know, that as part of the determination for eligibility of paratransit, we do hire professional medical services to determine the degree of paratransit eligibility and of the disability. Now, in terms of, we have of the 80% of the 170,000 individuals are registered and eligible to use our paratransit services, and 80% of them are not in wheelchair. 60% of them are, in fact, able to, are not impaired, that can in fact use the fixed route system and do for part of their trips. Not everyone who is eligible for paratransit services uses it for all trips. And what we're hoping to do is that for a certain part of those trips, those who are medically able will be incentivized to then transition over or shift to a fixed route. Now, this has been done very successfully in Los Angeles and in Washington, D.C. Los Angeles was able to shift 47% of their paratransit eligible riders to the fixed route system, and Washington, D.C. has done so to the extent of about 25%. What we are hoping is that if we institute this, we could see a shift of about 14% by 2015, which would be that would be about 1.5 million trips and could save us to the tune of about $90 million.
A question that I had when Bob and we had our pre-meeting briefing. If somebody is now enrolled in the paratransit, legally enrolled in the paratransit system, and they're getting the vehicles picking them up at their home and so forth, what would be, I don't quite understand what the incentive is. What's the incentive for somebody to switch to this program? I think it's a good idea, it's a great idea, but what makes them do it?
Well, there are a couple things.
But the accessibility is free now too, isn't it?
No. So if I may, yeah. Right. If I may just explain, one of the benefits that we see to the shift to a zero-fare program would be it gives the paratransit eligible rider the flexibility, because right now, if they want to schedule a ride, they have to do so within 24 hours prior to when they need to either go to a doctor's appointment or for any purpose. Because remember that paratransit services are provided, we cannot limit and we cannot restrict what the eligible rider wants to do on his trip or her trip. So therefore, someone could call and schedule a number of trips for different purposes. And what we're hoping is that this will give them the flexibility that when they want to go somewhere, they can actually go. They don't have to worry about, I didn't make the call 24 hours before. And in addition to that, it would also, as we're looking at the broader population, giving multiple options that would help us reduce the cost. We're also offering car service and taxi services, which are lower cost. than our access to ride. So there is a multiple ability, different options available to the eligible riders to do their trips, but we're hoping that this zero fare would actually shift a number of the rides that they take, definitely, possibly not all, but a number of the rides that they take that could be much more discretionary and with the flexibility save us a significant amount of money. Yes, absolutely. So right now, the access to ride is on an average of about $66 per trip. So round trip would be twice that amount, the cost of access to ride. And the cost to us is $66. They participate at $2.25. That's correct. And in addition to that, I believe the number is about maybe like 300,000 of the individuals who who take these trips bring a guest or a caregiver with them. So that's $2.25 for everyone who's on that van or service.
First of all, I move the proposal. I think it's a terrific plan. The paratransit has been one of the most not wasteful, but areas where we lose the most money in terms of our operations for the past decade. Now, in the past several years, we've done a terrific job in coming up with ways in which to shrink the costs and of the program, and which when this program loses the amount of money it does, essentially it robs services from all the other operations that we have. The car service has been a step in the right direction. Directly controlling the units and taking over operations in certain parts is also done. But this has huge upside with very little cost implications to us. It's classic thinking outside the box. There's really no downside to it in terms of what I can see, and I think that that the management should be applauded for coming up with this plan. Thank you.
And, Mr. Chairman, two things. This program last year cost us about $442 million. Your question that you had in your pre-meeting about why would someone change if they have been used to making the call 24 hours in advance and moving over to it. As Noria said, there are two issues there. One is spontaneity, the opportunity, but more importantly, when we asked the Auditor General to look at these numbers and verify where it is, he really focused on the growth of the number of people we expect over the financial plan, and we expect more of the new people who are added to the disability list to be able to take advantage of it. So that's where we see the potential, because it's actually growing by leaps and bounds, and so really that's the focus, and that's been the experience of both, especially at WMATA and Washington. LA is still new; they didn't have a base, but at Washington, it's the new folks who actually gravitate to it more frequently, and that savings would be significant.
I don't disagree with Commissioner Capelli, but I do have a couple of questions still. Nuria, you mentioned that you're trying to have some of the users of Access-a-Ride move at least some of their rides over to the fixed route system. If you're used to using Access-a-Ride 4 trips in a week and you decide that 2 of those could be done on the fixed route system, do you then qualify for a free Metro card?
The way that we are proposing to roll out this program is that all paratransit eligible users will receive a Metro card.
A free Metro card?
Yes.
So even if you still use Access-a-Ride for 3 out of 4 trips and your 4th trip is on the fixed route system, you qualify for a free Metro card?
That's correct.
And what is there to prevent that person from giving a family member that free Metro card and letting them use the system?
A very, very important question, and one that we certainly have thought about, because there's always concern of misuse and fraudulent use. So what we are proposing to do is that we would be very aggressive on the issue of fraud. We would have our bus operators, well, first of all, the card, just like we currently have for a reduced fare, the card would have a photo of the individual who has been found to be eligible. And then there will be a color for male and color for female, so it'll be easily identifiable. The second thing is that our bus operators will be requesting to confirm that the individual who is presenting that card is in fact the individual whose photo is on the card. We'll be mailing the cards directly to the homes of the individuals who have been found eligible. And the bottom line is that this initiative is really intended to find savings in a program that is, the costs are burgeoning out of control. So what we intend on doing is, in fact, if the number of fraud, the degree of fraud increases and the savings aren't there, we will cancel the program.
Some of the subway system is obviously accessible, and some of the people who will be getting the free Metro cards are ambulatory, so obviously there will be no bus driver involved in the subway usage of those free Metro cards. How do you prevent fraud in that case?
Okay. I would like to ask Tom Charles to address that.
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry to ask so many questions.
No, it's a good question. We are very aware of the profile of our customers. Generally, they are of senior age, and they're very sensitive to the number of trips and the duration of trips. So one of our profiles for fraud is currently employed is how frequently do they take trips, and that would be one measure that we would use. We also have a team that goes undercover to meet to make sure that the customer who we currently issued a ride to, whether it be car service carrier, has their ID and is the customer that's eligible for the trip. So there are various methods we'll be employing.
So if I can understand that correctly, if you now have an Accessoride user who uses the service twice a week, and you've issued that user a free Metro card, and the Metro card system shows that that person is using it 10 or 12 or 15 times a week, that's going to be flagged by somebody?
Yes, we will be monitoring it.
Okay, thank you.
Especially if it's consistent, if it's every morning and every evening and it looks like a commutation, that will become a big issue as to who is actually using the card.
And these cards are also going to be used as the identification on the Accessoride when they make a call? It's the same ID?
It's the same ID, that's correct.
Thank you. If an individual, well, let me start again. You mentioned that it would be used for people who were going to be getting door service to a fixed run, a fixed route facility. So presumably a person would be getting the card and they'd be picked up at their home, brought to a bus stop, or brought to a subway station?
Well, Mr. Blair, there'll be numerous different type of events that could take place. The individual could, in fact, be driven by a family member to a fixed route. They could use the card if they are actually on a trip where they are picked up at their home by an Accessoride and then taken to a fixed route, be a bus stop or a rail.
The reason for the question is, would the people who are being picked up in that interim leg, would they be charged the $2 1/4 for that before they then enter the fixed route system?
I believe that the way that it works today is that they pay the $2.25 just once. So if they're picked up in a van and taken to a bus stop or a train station, they pay at the bus stop, on the bus or at the train. They don't pay the driver of the van, the $2.25. They only pay it once.
I assume that you can provide in your agreements with the accessoride people or those who provide those services something that says that it is their obligation to take the people to the nearest subway facility or the bus rather than driving them from the Bronx to Queens where they could have taken the subway?
On their itinerary, we match the closest bus route or subway stop to there to make the trip more efficient.
Nourier, thank you. I think we have Alan, I think you did make a motion, right? Jim, second. All in favor, please? Any opposed? So moved.
I would say only in New York, so we have to hold a public hearing. Get something signed
Nourier, the one thing I think is really important is to set up a control. I'm sure you've all talked about that. I'm sure Joe has. So that I don't know when you're going to implement this and how long a test period that you want to provide. But I think it's really important to come back to the Finance Committee and, of course, the Transit Committee at a certain point in time. I don't know, when do you expect to roll this out?
Well, we would like to hold the public hearings and gather as much information as we can from there. There are a number of things that would need to be put in place before we can roll this out. So right now, I would just offer that it would not happen till probably the first quarter of 2013.
Oh, really? It's that far in advance? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I do think, though, as part of this thing, you have to have a really good control so that we know, I'm sure Joe's shaking his head, so that the Finance Committee and the Trans Committee knows what's really happened with this, that we really follow up, so that if it doesn't work as it's planned, then it can be amended or, reversed or whatever.
Yes, we will do so. We will have a very detailed process.
Right, terrific. I think it's a great thing, though.
Thank
It's really
you.
certainly worth trying, that's for sure.
Yes.
Thank you, Nourier. Yep, it's very good. It's absolutely worth trying. Okay, we go back to Pat. I guess you're up, Pat, on the fuel hedging, or?
David Keller will be doing it. You didn't report on fuel hedging.
You did vote? Did we vote? My fault, yeah.
Report on fuel hedging.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go over this fuel hedge program slideshow that you have in front of you.
Which is in the book, too, isn't it?
There are a couple of slides that are in the book, and I'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
Last November, we presented an overview of our hedging program strategy. We requested and we received, along with the December board adoption materials, extending the duration of our hedge contracts from 12 months to a maximum of 24 months. Starting this month, we are including 2 tables in your yellow Finance Committee books with some hedge information. You'll find those tables, which are also in the handout in front of you, starting on page 1149. That's just after the ridership tables that are in your yellow book. I'm going to now go over the slideshow, and I will also talk about those 2 tables, which are in the book as well. If you open up to page 2, this is a listing of our hedging activity to date. It goes back to March 2011. And the data on this table are also plotted on the subsequent graph. The first 5 diesel hedges and the natural gas hedges down at the bottom of this table were all entered into prior to your authorization to allow us to expand beyond 12 months. The 3 hedges, trades 7, 8, and 9, are all 18-month duration hedges. Those were entered into subsequent to the December vote. The prices on this and all subsequent tables and graphs represent just the commodity price. They exclude contractual markups for delivery, profit margins, etc., that the MTA pays along with our commodity prices to our vendors. The graph on on page 3 plots all of the 9 hedges that you saw on the graph before, but this is just for ultra-low sulfur diesel. If you notice, the prices had come down from trade 1 all the way down to trade 5, and starting with trade 6, they start to go back up again. Just lately, the last trade that Pat mentioned earlier was entered into that. The pricing for that trade actually came down for trade 9 from trade 8. The last 4 are going through the 18-month period, so you'll see some of these trades now go into 2013, so it moves on. The solid black line on this graph are actual prices, and when we get to March 2012, the actual commodity price was $3.27. The dashed line is the weighted average of our hedges, just our hedges. And as Pat also mentioned, we are now at $2.99 per gallon weighted average for our commodity hedges. If you go on to page 4, the bars at the bottom represent what percentage of our diesel fuel we're hedging each month. And when we get to March, we're at about 55% of our fuel is hedged. The red line is $2.99. That's the commodity portion of our budget for 2012. And the dotted line is the weighted average of the hedge. And as Pat mentioned, it goes up and down a little because some of our hedges fluctuate month to month, but it's basically $2.99. So our hedges currently for the year are the same price that we budgeted the commodity portion of our diesel fuel budget. The green dashed line is a blended price. $3.11 through March is the price that we paid for both the hedged and the unhedged weighted price for our commodity. So we are doing better than if we had purchased out purely on the market and going from $3.27 down to $3.11, and that's attributable to the hedges that are locked in right now at $2.99. The two graphs after that basically just illustrate what's happening with compressed natural gas. There was only one CNG hedge that we entered into, which actually expired at the end of March. We currently have no CNG hedges in place. The final graph, which is the table on page 7, this is the other item that will be in your book every month. This is illustrating to you what happens to our budget relative, in this case right now, what the adopted budget would look like if we were repricing it right now today. So if we look at just ultra-low sulfur diesel at the top, our current prices, the prices that we've paid so far to date, as well as what forward prices are saying they would be for the remainder of 2012, tell us that we're probably unfavorable by about $17 million just in ultra-low sulfur diesel for 2012. On the other hand, our hedges have been very favorable to us for about $7 million, so that $17 million unfavorable in ultra-low sulfur diesel gets brought down to about $10 million for the year. Compressed natural gas prices have come down considerably since the time we first put together the plan for the adopted budget, and we're about $25 million favorable in compressed natural gas for 2012 compared to the assumptions that we put into the budget. On the other hand, the hedges which were purchased before prices came all the way down were about unfavorable for about $1.2 million. So CNG is favorable right now today with the prices that we're expecting for the rest of the year to be favorable by about $23 million. So we are about $14 million favorable total in fuel if we had to re-budget today. For what we've seen year to date plus what we currently expect prices to be for the rest of the year, we're about $14 million favorable compared to the adopted budget. Again, the first graph, the first table and the last table will be in your Finance Committee books every month. And I believe we've promised to do a summary towards the end of each year in October, I believe? Yes. In October of each year.
Thank you. This is what we promised. You know, all the board members asked for this. I think you've really done a good job, you and Pat, in summarizing this thing, and I hope it's what everybody's wanted here over the last couple of meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pat, Finance Watch? I mean, not Finance Watch, but the report on the variable date.
Sure. So in the work plan is our commitment to discuss variable rate debt. And so there's a handout, and I think we've also got some slides. This is also on the screen. Starting with our first page, just to remind the committee, the board has adopted a variable rate debt policy. And this was done back in May of 2004. This is just a quick summary out of that policy. Why do we issue variable rate debt? We want the lowest possible interest cost on debt and a prudent level of interest rate risk, and therefore the policy shall apply, which is that we look at our portfolio and variable rate debt outstanding cannot exceed 25% of the aggregate principal amount of debt outstanding. As we go on in the presentation, now turning to the first pie chart, you can see that variable rate debt represents 7% of our total portfolio of outstanding debt right now. And so we're focused on this red slice here. that's 2.23 billion or 7%. And I would just note that this is down about 1% from where we were a year ago, and that's due to just ongoing management of the portfolio, banks exiting the business, taking out auction rate debt, and so forth, other actions that have caused that number to go down a little bit. Fixed rate debt continues to be the primary way we issue bonds, and it's 80% now. Turning to the next page, what does that variable rate debt look like? And I would just, these are the various products we have outstanding in variable rate mode. The biggest being weekly variable rate demand bonds that are associated with a variety of different banks that provide either standby bond purchase agreements or letters of credit on the bonds. We also have daily VRDBs here. Same idea, again, a letter of credit from a bank that provides support on the bonds. Commercial paper supported by letters of credit. And these two categories, the purple and the blue, are new categories of variable rate debt. The first is floating rate notes, $446 million or 9%. And this is a product that we found to be, we've realized some attractive pricing in the market. It's very competitive with where the banks would charge us for these standby bond purchase agreements or letters of credit. It allows us to take advantage of the short market, and we believe with very minimal risk. The second new category is private placement, and you see $200 million there, or 4%. This was a transaction that we did earlier, I should say last year, with Wells Fargo Bank. The product itself looks very much like a bond that's supported by a bank with a letter of credit, but it's privately placed with the bank. It's not traded in the secondary market, although they do have the right to sell off their part of it if they so desire. And then lastly, up at the top, you see auction rate securities, $325 million or 6%. As you all know, this is a product that is not working in the market. The auctions are failing. I would just note that this category is down 10% from where we were last year. And it reflects our continuing work to exit out of that product. So we'll continue to work on that this year. Turning to the next slide, I won't read through all this. This is just summarizes in writing what I just discussed. Turning to the next page, what do the market environments look like that we've been issuing in? And you see here 5-year rate history. On the left side, this is what we would think about as the fixed market, the proxy for the fixed market. And then on the right side, you see here the variable rate market, which is what we're talking about today. What is the rate history on that been over the past 5 years? And of course, you see that dramatic spike at the end of 2008 that was very short-lived, but reflects the sort of the trauma that was going on in the market at that time. But as you can see, since 2009, we've been in a sustained period of very low short interest rates, and that's been enormously beneficial to the MTA in its variable rate debt. Turning to the next slide, you see what does this look like over the past year, and the blue line represents the variable rates that we've experienced in the portfolio. The red line is our average over the year at 0.89%. That's up just slightly from where we were last year at 0.70%. So again, a very attractive funding cost for the capital program for that part of our portfolio that's prudently low. Turning to the next slide, you see that the one thing about this portfolio is it does require a fair amount of attention from time to time. And when we talk about liquidity expirations, this is a bank that's supporting a bond transaction in the market now that's going to expire. Those agreements are typically done 1, 2, or 3 years. And each year when that expiration comes up, we discuss with the bank, do they want to renew? If they want to renew, at what price? And so forth. And what we see is that many banks are exiting this business. They're not participating to the degree that they were prior to the market dislocation in 2008. and that requires us to look at other products like the FRN product here, noted in red. And when that product comes up for renewal, and as we discussed, I think a month or so ago, Jim, the bond is remarketed, and again, we evaluate market conditions with our underwriter at the time or the remarketing agent at the time. We look at our where the opportunities are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years out, and we remarket that bond. There are some cases where we've actually issued an FRN with a hard maturity, meaning that's when the bond matures and there's no remarketing necessary. And that issuing the FRN with a hard maturity gets us a better cost than if we have to remarket. The one thing that we haven't done is issue an FRN that has this what we would call a hard put, that essentially if we can't remarket it would cause an event of default. We have not done that. What we've done is we've issued them with a soft put, which means that we'll have a long period to get the bond back in the market, and if it doesn't, the worst case scenario is we kick to a higher rate for some such time that we would then evaluate what else we could do, whether it's fixing out or issuing a different variable rate product, and because we have that flexibility with all of our multimodal documents. There's a couple appendices here just for your takeaway. There's a more detailed liquidity expiration schedule, and then variable rate remarketing assignments associated with all of our outstanding bonds. What members of the underwriting syndicate in the MTA group have those remarketing assignments. So I think with that, I would just take any questions. Sir. Sure. We report that every month in the committee book, and if you turn to Roman numeral 4-7, you see those auction bonds that are outstanding. If you look at the most recent period, April 9th through April 15th, you see 0.48%, 0.663%, 0.661%, and so forth. And then down at the next tranche, you see the longer auction rate bonds, the 28 and 35-day auctions, again, 0.489%, 0.665. So even though the auctions themselves are failing, the debt itself is a very attractive funding cost right now. And you had asked about those transportation revenue bonds those were the 2002 B bonds, and the board has authorized us to undertake a tender offer and refunding of those bonds. But at the moment, we're not in a rush to do that, again, because the cost is still very attractive, even in failing mode.
And what about the FRNs? When you are unable to remarket, what's the interest rate on that?
In the event of a failed remarketing, they kick to 11%. And as I noted when this discussion last occurred, we've given ourselves a 6-month remarketing window. So you would have to have a 6-month period where you've tried to remarket that note and you've failed, and it goes to 11%. In the rare event that would ever happen, we would probably invoke our rights to convert the bonds to probably a fixed rate mode and enter the market and do that with the bonds.
Are these taxable or non-taxable?
These are all tax exempt.
Do you issue non-taxables also?
These are all non-taxable.
They're all non-taxable.
They're all non-taxable, tax exempt. I can't think of a time when we last issued a taxable bond. It's a pretty rare occurrence. Well, the Build America bonds would be the best, most recent example of a taxable bond, where we get the benefit back from the Treasury.
Have we heard from the Albany budget director about the fee issue?
We've been pressing them for a definitive answer, and we're still awaiting that. We expect a favorable answer soon.
Thank you. Pat, this is an excellent report and very informative. Looking at that last slide with the last bar chart, rather, yes. With the bank's reducing their involvement in this area. Can you just give us a sense in the marketplace what other large issuers, I understand that we are probably the gorilla in this area, but what other large issuers are doing to manage that trend?
Sure. Other large issuers are in the same boat that we're in. They're, working very hard to keep the banks interested and keep the banks in the transactions. We have seen other issuers around the country start to get into the floating rate note product that we've discussed here. We've also seen other issuers do the private placements, again, that we've also done. So I don't think there's any, we're always keeping our ears to the ground and talking with our representatives of our underwriters about new products that they see, and there are a few new products that we're taking a look at and evaluating. We're not ready to, to do anything with them yet, but we're watching them, seeing what other issuers are doing. But primarily what we see in that mix of products there, weeklies, dailies, FRNs, commercial paper, private placements, that's the core universe of products.
Yeah. I would also say we are and have put in place some very old products that have been around for a long time, just straight fixed rate notes. The rates are very attractive because the steepness of the yield curve, we know we're in the marketplace all the time. With the amortization that we have of our debt, we can have sizable pieces of maturities that come due 1 year, 2 years, 3 years out. So we have started selling just plain, simple, fixed-rate notes to try to continue to benefit from the steepness of the yield curve. So,
I think that's a great report, and I think, again, that's what this committee's been asking for, and I thank you. I think everybody agrees it's well done. Okay, procurements, Doug.
Next, we have headquarter procurements. There are 3 competitive procurements for MTA headquarters for a grand total of $24,454,708.
Okay, motion, please. Second, please. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we go to the Metro-North Long Island Railroad Committee. First, there's an agency action item. Metro-North is requesting board approval to execute a supplemental agreement for $5,678,000 between New York State Department of Transportation and Metro-North for the design costs associated with the conversion of the construction contract documents from a lump sum contract to unit price item contract as per NYSDOT's requirements, and the construction phase cost associated with the replacement of Bridge Street Bridge located in the hamlet of New Hamburg, town of Poughkeepsie in Dutchess County, New York.
Okay. Oh, Jim, did you want to say something? No. All in favor, please? Any opposed? So moved.
Moving to the procurements for the Metro-North and Long Island Railroad. For Metro-North, there are 4 competitive procurements for a total of $43,857,561. 1 is with the Long Island Railroad and New York City Transit, and 3 are with Capital Construction.
Okay, motion, please. Second, please. All in favor? Any opposed? So moved, Doug.
There are 3 procurements for the Long Island Railroad for a total of $6,983,153. 2 non-competitive procurements, 1 with Metro-North and 1 competitive procurement with Capital Construction.
Motion, please. Moved. Second, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried, please.
Next, we go to MTA bus operations. There's 2 competitive procurements, 1 New York City Transit jointly with MTA Bus Company, and 1 for NYCT Direct for a grand total of $27,904,278.
Motion, please. Second, please. All in favor? Any opposed? So moved.
Next is bridges and tunnels. There are 2 competitive procurements for a grand total of $23,382,421.
Second, please. All in favor? Any opposed? So moved, Doug.
Thank you. We have 3 procurements for New York City Transit for a grand total of $39,414,980. 1 non-competitive procurement and 2 competitive procurements with Capital Construction.
Second, please. All in favor? Any opposed? So moved.
There are no items for FIMTAC. That would conclude the finance portion of the meeting. Jeff, I'm going to take over with real estate.
Jeff, welcome. There's a walk-in item here that's not in our book, which Jeff is going to address, and I'd just like to lead off by saying this is the beginning of, not a culmination, it's really the beginning, but something that this committee and Jeff and his staff have been diligently working on for quite a few years now, and I just want to say, taking a little of the thunder away, I'm really excited about Jeff, and you guys really your team really did a great job doing this, and I think the committee will be very happy that this is the beginning of this process that we embarked on a couple of years ago, and go ahead.
Thanks, Andrew. Does everybody have the J Street handout? Okay, so before we get to the action items, let me just say, by way of information, we've given periodic reports on general initiatives, including our advertising, our effort to transform our advertising fleet, if you will, as rapidly as possible to digital. I'm happy to say that after only 3 or 4 months, CBS has already recouped the capital investment of roughly $500,000 that they made in what we call the dioramas at Grand Central, and as of March, we're into incremental rev share of $120,000 a month. So that's a great result. They're doing very well also on their urban panels. The digital screens at the tops of the stairways on the subways. Well into recovery of that capital investment, significantly larger capital investment, and expect very soon that will be resulting in additional revenues for us. And I think that the important story there is that the template that the board authorized us to follow in modifying our waterfall, if you will, under our advertising contract has yielded results, and I think hopefully, to extend the water metaphor, prime the pump for more such investment like CBS. In fact, I'm confident that we'll be in coming months telling you about some other things that they're going to be doing along those lines. By the same token, the item in today's agenda relating to the new proposed restaurant and beer hall in the Portchester station represents the first and hopefully one of many successful results from our effort to aggressively market some of our historic properties, both in Metro North and Long Island Railroad land. As I reported a few months ago, our objectives there are not just revenue production, but cost avoidance and repurposing of these buildings to provide really exciting amenities for customers. We think we've achieved all three in the case of this proposal from the principals of Heartland Brewery. As I say, I hope more to follow. Do you have any questions about these?
May I suggest that you adhere to the description of it as one advanced by Metro North this morning as being essentially a place for the service of food and incidental drink, bearing in mind our efforts through the police to crack down on the use of alcoholic beverages on the trains.
Fair enough. I'm sure that there'll be very little ribaldry there, or proportionate ribaldry. So anyway, we're very happy with that result.
Do you want to have a vote on the?
Well, I was going to do all of them at once for one vote, if you like. Yes, if that works for everybody.
Could I ask a question?
Sure, of course.
On the handout, in the second paragraph, you say that the MTA has decided to sell 341 to 347 Madison. Has that definitive decision been made, or is a long-term lease now out of the question?
No, I beg your pardon. I would have thought that said dispose of, and as I've said repeatedly here, I think our expectation is sell in the popular sense of the word, but I think our expectation is and will remain that it'll be a long-term lease.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just for those of you who were fortunate enough to go to the Metro North LARR committee, where the Heartland lease was presented as an information item. All the questions I posed, I spent some time with Jeff before this meeting. We had a substantive conversation, and all the questions I posed were satisfactorily answered and discussed, and I just want to thank Jeff and his staff for doing so.
Okay, thanks, John. The next item I wanted to highlight is the Banana Republic lease at Grand Central, in that we were able to more than double our rent on renewal in spite of the fact that Banana had not been into percentage rent under their lease. I think that's a very strong result, and I dare say reflects some of the recent developments and excitement at Grand Central. So we think very good forward momentum there. With respect to Fanchon Place, which is item A in the action items, there's a correction for the record. I apologize for this in 3 places. The staff summary makes reference to Jamaica Depot. The staff summary ought to reference East New York. Again, I'm sorry. I hope the minutes will so reflect. As you know, I won't say it's a moratorium, but we've been trying to be extremely prudent in to minimize expenditures to acquire new properties, and always looking to make do with our existing portfolio. This is a bus command center that is clearly a project that needs doing. It's in the capital plan. The reason we're acquiring this additional property is we've determined that it'll be possible for us to save something like 90% of what would have been additional construction cost associated with cantilevering and fitting onto a smaller site. So this will allow us to do much more efficient construction. This is a request for authorization to acquire by negotiation or through condemnation, and there's a resolution in the staff summary accordingly. Unless there are specific questions about the other items, I won't address them here, and that brings me to J Street. As Andrew says, this is a culmination, I would say, of efforts over many years to address a kind of a conundrum that we've faced, because the building is not in good condition. It requires a good deal of work. It was, as you know, was the former headquarters of the Transit Authority. The property is the subject of the city master lease dating back to 1953. Indeed, I believe it was before I was born, but I believe that Transit Authority was in that building before the Am I that young? I'm very young. I was born in 1956. For the record. Thank you, Andrew. It was long-time transit headquarters. Of course, when transit moved to Broadway starting about 10 years ago, the building had largely outlived its usefulness. But what's not generally appreciated in the community is that it has continued to house vital telecommunications equipment, which for some reason people saw fit to put on the 14th floor. Transit, I want to say that Andrew was very kind about our efforts in real estate. This has been a tremendous effort by a lot of people at the Transit Authority in studying and addressing the logistics of relocating this equipment, and making sure that we could manage the risks around that process. As I had suggested previously, it's been some months since we determined that we no longer needed to use the building in our plan to address our office needs. As you know, the capital program had initially provided some $184 million for the renovation of this property for office use. The theory there was that it would enable us to terminate leases elsewhere in the portfolio with attendant savings, but for some while we haven't been able to make that pencil, and as we've initiated the right-sizing project and shrunk the administrative headcount, we determined that would not be cost effective. So the question was then what to do. And under the master lease, if we no longer need a property, we're to so inform the city, and it reverts to them. Of course, the dilemma, the conundrum here is that we did need the property to house this communications equipment, albeit in a way that wasn't doing much for the community and was not making full use of the property. So I'm happy to say that we've now come to terms with the city on the basis for a surrender of the property that will provide $50 million to the MTA to allow us to relocate that equipment. That relocation process is going to take some while, and as the city has made its arrangements through its own competitive RFP process to dispose of the property to NYU, a good deal of our effort in the last period of time has been in addressing that phasing and those logistics. In short, we will be after about a 6-month period when the city will be completing environmental review under SECRA and NYU will be completing some due diligence. It's anticipated that there'll be a period of about 24 months where we will do the work needed to relocate, well, I should say to skinny down to an occupancy that is limited to areas in the basement of the building, on the 14th floor where the bulk of the equipment is, and a single chase. That will allow NYU to close, to purchase to acquire a leasehold interest in the property, and continue with their construction. We will then have some 18 months concurrently with that renovation of the building to complete the cutover of our equipment so that we'll be self-sufficient and fully functional in the basement thereafter. And the NYU money is going to go into escrow at the start of our work in advance of the closing to allow us to have the assurance and certainty that we will be paid for that work. So that's the structure, and as I say, we're very happy with that.
Equipment will go to the basement level? Is that the plan?
That's right. At one time there had been a thought of moving it to Livingston Plaza,
Yeah,
but
right.
this is, the engineers had determined that this was the most efficient relocation, and we'll be behind a wall to effectively be part of the subway station there.
Well, as you know, since this was the Transit Authority's headquarters at one time, and money was brought here, and there's a door right on the platform to go, I assume that's going to be totally secure when this is when you've moved all your
It's part of the scope of work is to seal off the
Good.
the money train connection.
So Jeff has made, there's a list of action items in the book. I'd like to have a motion, please. So moved. The second, please. Second. Alan, did you want to say something before we vote?
This is a great thing for the community that surrounds this property. A number of us have been clamoring about our social responsibility to the neighborhood and holding up this building from being a productive part of the community. So, I mean, this is a big, big day for Brooklyn. The MTA has gotten it right here. The money that we're getting back is probably more than I would have envisioned in the surrender of the lease. So you guys did a great job, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Al.
Okay, all in favor, please? Aye. Any opposed? Jeff, everything's moved, and thank you for doing a good job, and the Transit Authority, which I didn't mean to slight.
Yeah, but I don't even really know where to begin in singling out people at the Transit Authority who are instrumental in doing this. But I would like to say I've gotten to know David Henley very well in the last month or so, and he led an effort there that was really extraordinary.
Great,
Thanks.
great project. Okay, a motion, please, to adjourn our meeting. Second, please. All in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thanks. Great. Yeah, great. Terrific. I got it right. Angela, I'll see you.